Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome to the meeting here of the Cabinet. First of all, I have to go through the housekeeping rules and regulations. The action in the event of an emergency. There is no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Verrill Street. The Council audio records all its public meetings and these recordings are published on the Council's website. Toilets are available on this floor as well as on the ground and second floors of the town hall. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. Before I ask the members of the Cabinet to introduce themselves, for the benefits of the members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for the day-to-day decision-making of the Council for all services and also makes recommendations to full Council on our major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 8 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a range of the services. I am Councillor Paul Smith and I am the leader of the Council. I'll then invite my other councillors, colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Feltham.
Evening everybody, I'm Annie Feltham, I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council and I've got the portfolio for communities and leisure.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Dominic Graham, my portfolio is for street and waste services.
Good evening, Councillor Bill Frame, responsible for economic growth and planning.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, responsible for resources.
Good evening everyone, Councillor Beverley Oxford, Customers Portfolio Holder.
Hello, Tina Bourne, Housing and Public Protection Portfolio Holder.
Councillor Tim Young, I'm Deputy to the Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Community Safety, Licensing and Culture.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Officer.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive.
Thank you very much. There are no urgent items that I'm aware of. No declarations of interest at this stage, but if any do become available to people, please let me know. Item 4, Have Your Say. I have 2 general Have Your Say speakers, Mr Mark Gocher and Councillor Rosalind Scott. I would like to call Mr Mark Gocher first, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes. The bell will sound after 2 minutes, and when it rings again for the second time, you're finished.
Right.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to ask a general question, really, and what it is what is it, if anything, that you as a council cabinet can do to mitigate some of the negative effects of today's budget on vulnerable people? And obviously there's a number of specific issues to that, but I'm thinking, for example, in terms of the benefits cap. The benefits cap is being reduced, and my colleagues in the Green Party have already encountered a case of a large family with children that have been thrown out of council accommodation because they can't afford to pay the rent. Now, what is it that you can do to mitigate the effects of the benefits cap in terms of people not being able to afford to stay in their homes, for example? Secondly, what can you do to mitigate the effect of the fact that the under-25s, in particular, are now going to find it very difficult to get access to housing benefit? How are you going to help to avoid the under-25s ending up on the street? Thirdly, in terms of general poverty, you know there have been changes to child credits, for example, in the budget. In terms of people who are reliant on food banks because they can no longer afford to feed their children, let alone pay the rent, is there anything you can do as a council to mitigate the effects of that, apart from just telling people to go to the food bank? And finally, obviously I'm a member of the Green Party. It's not part of today's budget, but on Friday George Osborne is about to announce another wave of major changes to the planning system, which will undoubtedly deregulate it further. what are you as a council cabinet going to do in response to that? Are you going to just go with the flow of a developer's charter being created, or is there anything you can do about that one? But my main question is about the effects of the budget today on poverty, and what can you do about that?
Thank you very much for your comments. Obviously, we are Colchester Borough Council. We are not the government. And much as we would like to be able to change government policy, we do not have that power. What we do have the power to do is to help the people of Colchester. And you mentioned the benefits cap there. I would draw your attention to the excellent work that our welfare benefits team has done. When the benefits cap was first introduced, our benefits team contacted every single family that was affected by the benefits cap. We found that roughly half of those were qualified for exemptions, particularly in the case of having performed military service for the council, and they were removed. That from the benefits cap. That's the sort of help that we as a council are very proud to have done. You've talked about housing. Another thing that this council has done is we built the first new council homes in Colchester for a generation. And those homes that we built were energy efficient. They have solar panels in the roof that will produce savings in energy efficiency and also in budgetary terms, enabling the people in those homes to have a benefit on average of £130 a year. Very generous support there, I think, that we've done as a council. Food banks was another item that you mentioned, and I know Councillor Beverley Oxford was busy only on Friday taking part in a trolley dash around Tesco's in Highwoods with myself, supporting the food banks there with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. And again, that's part of what we've done, and I know we've also held regular collections for the food banks in Colchester, and many councillors have given generously of their own time to support these things. So I think, as a council, we have done as much as we possibly can to affect the situation. You'll hear more as we go through the budget, some of the things that we're planning to do in the future. Dealing very briefly with the planning situations, obviously we will be bound by planning law. But what we have done as a council is we have tried to ensure an increase in the amount of social housing that's provided in Colchester, because we know how difficult it is for someone on a Colchester salary to afford to buy a property on Colchester prices. So I think you would agree from what we've said that we have done the best that we can to try and help the people of Colchester in these difficult times. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Leader. I also wanted to add that what Colchester Borough Council is very good at and what it has achieved national status for is for being proactive in the face of the welfare changes that were brought in from April 2013. Yet, as a council, with our partners, we started working on in October 2011. So we didn't know what the budget was going to be saying. We had some, we suspected some of the announcements, but it does appear that the under-25s have been very harshly treated by this summer budget. So there's not much sunshine there if you are under 25. What we will continue to do as a council is look at and not stop working proactively with our partner organisations in order to ensure that people don't slip through the net, and in order to ensure that we advertise very well the type of support that is available across the borough. And because we've been one of those boroughs to continue to support our voluntary sector partners, we still have, which unfortunately some local authorities don't have anymore, a large number of organisations that we can signpost to and that can come with us and help with the expertise that's necessary in some of these very hard times. As regards universal credit, we're working very strongly with the Department of Work and Pensions, and we'll use our expertise in that way as well. So we will look very carefully, Mr. Gocher, at all the ramifications from today's budget to make sure Sometimes it's only over the following few weeks that some of the detail crops up, and we may need to amend some of our processes. But we will not rest on our laurels to make sure that everyone receives fair treatment.
Thank you. Councillor Frame.
Thank you, Leader. One of the other aspects of helping people, of course, is to give them job opportunities within Colchester. And we've been working very hard to try and ensure that there are opportunities for all ages in terms of employment within the borough. And the number of people unemployed has gone down, and therefore it gives them an opportunity to control their own lives in that way by getting them into well-paid work, which enables them to come off the benefit system and to be enjoying the benefits, if you like, of their own work that they're doing and the wages they're getting. So there is another aspect to it, which is making sure we provide that background where people can thrive and get further employment.
Thank you very much. And of course, as a Living Wage Council, we are supporting that again. The next speaker is Councillor Rosalind Scott. Good evening, Ros. I'm sure you know the rules.
I echo the anti-austerity message from Colchester residents to Cabinet today. I note that people are here to bring attention to social injustice and to highlight stories of how excessive, inflexible cuts and processing of cuts has caused misery to local people here in Colchester. The extreme cuts are now confirmed by Chancellor Osborne in his budget of personal ambition. Scarcity causes intolerable stress to individuals and families, and children and other vulnerable groups are the ones who bear the brunt of this stress. There are two attitudes to life: living in scarcity and living in abundance. An attitude of scarcity means that never having enough, always saving and hoarding, looking out for ourselves as individuals, not understanding the abundance of resources, not just money at our own disposal, and ignoring the well-being of the community. This self-serving attitude is evident in the austerity propaganda and the nature of the cuts. An attitude of abundance, on the other hand, acknowledges the riches of our resources and uses them for the betterment of the whole community. The anti-austerity message reminds us that we are a rich country, narrowing the gap between poor and rich, maintaining the funding of services to ensure that no one is hungry or homeless, acknowledging that every person is deserving of reasonable conditions, even if they haven't been able to find work, whatever the barriers, be they disability, illness, age, social situation, is our urgent moral duty. As a community, we can and should use our abundance for the good of all. As a council, we need to use our abundance for the good of all. No one thrives while their neighbours are ill-fed, unhappy and unhealthy. I'm proud of the record of the Coalition Council in building contingency funds and setting a balanced budget. I'm pleased to note that this is a council that has set a budget to protect services and jobs in spite of reduced funding from Essex County Council and the government. I'm especially proud of our example in the policy on homelessness. The housing policy is similarly predicated on holistic promotion of well-being for families and individuals. The welfare cuts announced today are based on cutting and scapegoating. Please continue to pay the living wage to all and take the next step to use contractors who pay the living wage. Use and support small local businesses to benefit the town. We are aware that there's money in the bank at the moment and that it's allocated and only slightly higher, has only slightly a higher unallocated reserve. This is not hoarding, but I urge that the programmes that are already earmarked be carried out speedily to turn barren money into community benefits. I request that Cabinet responds to the calls from the public to refute the anti-austerity message. The message from the local
Ros, sorry, Ros, your time
that we are
is up.
Anti-austerity.
Thank you very much. As you said, you were going to flout the rules. But as Chair, I have to enforce them, even though I wasn't sharing much of the sentiment of your statements there. I think what you said about the living wage, I have to correct you on one thing. We now have a policy as a Living Wage Council of ensuring that on all new contracts, our contractors do have to provide the living wage on the conditions that the employee is on council premises for 2 hours a week, I believe. Anything beyond that? So we have already taken the next step there, and as you will hear later on this evening, some of the contracts, in fact all the contracts that we're going to be awarding tonight are going to local firms, because this council, as administration, took the decision that we wanted to prefer and do everything we can to support the local economy, because we think that's good, not just for the environment, but also for the local economy and for the local people, that we keep as much of the enterprise within the borough as possible. So thank you very much for your contribution on that. If there's no other Cabinet members who wish to contribute on that, I will move on to the next item on the agenda. Colleagues, will you confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of May and the 3rd of June?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. The next item is the calling procedures. There are no matters on that. Next is item 7.1, the appointment of contractors for the refurbishment of Enoch House sheltered housing accommodation. Councillor Bourne, I'm sure you're going to tell us about how we're going to be spending the council's resources and reserves on supporting local businesses and the local community.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Leader, I should say. It's been reading my speech. It's exciting times. It's great to spend money on investment programmes for older people in our community. And colleagues, you will recall that we have a number of older persons accommodation, sheltered housing projects that were built some time ago. And we have a programme of investment over £10 million to invest in our sheltered housing schemes. Now, the refurbishment is not a lick of paint and a new carpet, like some people might think. It is far more extensive than that, and you will recall some of the decisions that we made many years ago around what that refurbishment would look like. And without wanting to steal the thunder of the excellent presentation that you'll be viewing in a moment, we have already completed one scheme at Worsnop House, and the paper you have in front of you is to appoint the contractors for Enoch House, which is in the beautiful ward of St Andrews that myself and Councillor Young represent. It's a popular location. People want to live there, obviously. It's on a bus route, and the refurbishment will be changing the bedsits into fit-for-purpose 21st century accommodation for older people. Now, I'd like to introduce Karen Lohman, Director of Housing at Colchester Borough Homes, our partners who will be delivering this project on our behalf. So we will probably need to vacate the table on this side so that we can view the presentation, so that you know what the refurbishment will look like. And they are very, very similar schemes in their layout, and therefore the reconfiguration is something we've already gone through before at Worsnop House. So it's much nicer to view the slides on the screen, not least because there's one with me in it. Thank you. I'll hand over to Karen.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. good to remember back a little while, back in October 2012, when this council approved a programme of investment in our sheltered housing stock. Issues at that time were presented as accommodation that was in really low demand, and the rental income was being lost on empty properties and sheltered housing not being particularly popular. So following a fairly extensive consultation with both residents and those on the housing register who might consider sheltered housing as an option, we looked at our offer of sheltered housing and took advice from them on what we could consider for the future. Some of the issues that were really important to people were, as Councillor Bourne's just said, the general location of the sheltered housing scheme, the locality, the facilities and the amenities within that local community. And that's began our journey. And so since that time, we've done some important things and some milestones to remember. So 2 of our sheltered schemes were sold, remember back to Abbygate House and Joyce Brooks House. And the investment from those schemes has helped us to invest in new accommodation. So we've had a planned and phased approach to improve Worsnop House, now moving on to the next phase of Enoch House. Both schemes with bed-sitter accommodation, where the residents were sharing bathing facilities and living in very small accommodation. At that time, we set a Colchester standard, and we adopted that with 3 key themes, which were independent living, hotel-feel accommodation, and energy efficiency. And those are themes that we continue throughout the design stage. So just a quick reminder about what is sheltered housing. So it presents a secure environment where our residents retain their independence, own front door, but the ability to link into a 24-hour alarm call service, regular staff attendance at the scheme, and each scheme is actually unique in its nature. Many of you will have visited many of our schemes, and they all have their individual community feel around them, offering a range of social activities to prevent isolation and really promote well-being with elder people. Certainly fit for the future, because in the future we know what we're going to see. We've just heard the comments about the budget and what's coming, but we will see more reliance on maintaining people's independence longer and a direction with greater use of technology. So here's Worsnop House back in 2012, a real flashback and a reminder of how it would have looked at that time. But it did have good location, very hard to let. We had a number of empty properties there, 10 at the count just before we started the refurbishment project. And the building itself consisted of a number of bedsits, some of them for general needs tenants who are generally some very vulnerable single people, using it as a step on the housing ladder, and linked to a sheltered scheme with, again, bedsits, 1-bedroom flats, and a warden's flat that had been retained there. So now the transformation, just before we go, a quick flashback to those bathrooms. This is, generally they were sharing 6 bedsits to each bathroom, and these were the bathrooms, and the bottom photograph is one of the bed sitting rooms, where there was just space for a single bed in that sitting room with an alcove for the kitchen unit, and then the bathroom you'd have to put your slippers and robe on and drop down the corridor to. So that's how it was, and although some people had lived there quite comfortably and didn't complain because it was what they knew. So from that, what we've come to now is the new Worsnop House, completed in January this year, on time and on budget, and now offers 34 self-contained apartments. Now we've taken this energy efficiency. You can see from the photographs there the PV panels on all of the roofs. We've got a high-tech plant there, which means the energy efficiency is as good as you can get it. Triple glazing in all of the windows. The water is heated to the right temperature, so there's not a relapse in the temperature there. A good amount of storage space, which was one of the priorities from our residents there. Modern fitted kitchens, shower rooms, and really attractive common spaces. All of the apartments there have a balcony or a patio area, and the building now has 2 lifts, so it's not vulnerable if one breaks down or something's happening in the other lift, such as somebody moving in, which happens from time to time. The new building has a hairdressing room, a treatment area, a jacuzzi bath, a quiet meeting space, and a conservatory. And there's just a few more photographs. Now, where you see the bathroom here, that's in an individual flat, and you can see the refurbished kitchen area with built-in appliances and the balcony windows to the flat. The residents remained on site during the time that we were undertaking the refurbishment, and that's not common. But we've done that to be really smart and effective with the funds that we had, which meant that we could continue to create a rental income while works were on site. We didn't have to move all 36 of the residents that were there at the time, which would have caused even more disruption for them. We spoke to them extensively at the beginning of the programme about their preference, and overwhelmingly they wanted to stay on site and be involved in the build as it went through. We had a tenant representative throughout who was elected by the residents, who became really involved in the tender selection process and regularly attended our contract meetings to liaise with us and act as a pivot liaison for the residents there. What we really have achieved there, these are some of the common parts of the scheme. This is how we've tried to achieve that hotel feel and a real aspiration for people who might want to move into sheltered schemes, bearing back in that 2012 where it was hard to let and people didn't want to go there. But the contribution of the residents have really influenced the way that this looks and it feels, from the little things that you see as the signage. They didn't want it to look corporate. They wanted it to feel more homely and more local to them. So they've had their say in the decoration and the fixtures and pictures on the walls. The communal facilities have been decorated and finished to a high standard and designed really to make life easier. Residents have the freedom and privacy of their own home, with the added benefit of the lounge where they can feel like company, or some of the many activities that they engage in. Just prior to Christmas, we started to promote Worsnop House to encourage people to move in, and actually from being a hard-to-let scheme, we had overwhelming demand from people looking to move into the new apartments. So at the end of the scheme, we had 9 empty apartments to let, and we were able to let those as a priority to those people giving up family homes within Colchester. So that released 9 general needs accommodations for families to move into off the housing register there. We had a contribution from Essex County Council for 4 of the flats to make them fully adapted for disabled people. Again, that means that we don't have to adapt accommodation in general needs stock and puts people with a disability into an environment where they can mix with others easily and don't feel so isolated. One of the things that's happened along the way, and we've been really proud of, is the technology within Worsnop House. The project here received European demonstration funding as a resulted in innovative use of technologies. And as a result, the council's benefited from a grant of £295,000 worth of funding. And that promotes that lovely photograph of the plant room, for anybody interested in the technology. But people come here to view that technology. And recently there's been a conference in Colchester where many of the visitors came to look at Worsnop. This is the one demonstration site in England where this technology is available to come and see. So we're really proud that it's there. It's highly inefficient. The lighting systems throughout the building have got central generation distribution into individual flats so the tenants can control their own levels of heating, although the power and heat comes from one plant. We've incorporated light tubes using natural light rather than electric light throughout the building. And the atrium on the front of the building has not only improved the feel, but it has introduced a real identity and encourages residents to enhance the flow through the building. So has it made a difference? Well, I certainly think so, and I think many of you who will have visited, and certainly anybody who's spoken to the residents who now live there, there's a few comments there that I'll let you read through. But certainly my favourite, the one on the bottom here, which says, "My mum is 96. She had to put up with the bedsit for years. I had to visit her every week to take her down the corridor for a bath. We now absolutely love the new flat, especially to be able to cook meals and enjoy a shower in private. Mum's even tried the jacuzzi bath and said it was her best experience ever." So now we move on to the next phase, where we've got Enoch House. It's in one of our most popular areas. It's close to the central library. It's a bus stop directly outside, lots of facilities and shops nearby. And it's a similar design and layout to Worsnop House. So we've learnt lessons from Worsnop House, and we've listened to the people that live there about what perhaps we could have done better, and we've learnt as we've gone along. And we've incorporated some of those into the lessons moving forward. We've talked extensively and engaged with the residents at Enoch House from a very early stage. So they're very involved. Again, they overwhelmingly want to stay on site whilst building work is carried out. We have a bit of an advantage at Enoch House. There's a bit of additional land, so we're going to undertake some demolition and rebuild on one wing, which will incorporate some additional flats for us. And the aim on that is to complete it by the deadline that we have of April 2017. Fire safety will be improved throughout. And again, as we did before, we want this to be an exemplar scheme, and we're talking to Essex County Council Fire about the use of sprinklers within the accommodation, so it can be an exemplar and an example to others to see the use of safety within the scheme. So really to future-proof it, and many of you will have already seen the plans. Here it is on the drawing stage, but again, what we'll end up with will be 36 one- and two-bedroom apartments, again designed and built to a very high standard. The flats will range in size because we're constrained by the existing layout, but generally they're all around 50 square metres, many of them above squared in size, which compares really well with any new build and design that would happen. The key factors that we're considering here are security, energy efficiency, and space and storage. And they come directly from our residents, and that's what we'll be working for. We're aiming to complete this scheme by autumn 2017, with the majority of the renovation and new build completed by spring of that year. The support from the local community, the community centre, the library and other schemes close by have been great in supporting the residents, because we know as we go through we'll have to move some residents around the scheme, and we'll be looking to incorporate additional activity space for them while works are in progress. But the tenants are pleased, and we're aiming to complete the work in a planned way, working with them throughout the scheme again. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Karen. I think that was a very impressive presentation, and it is a shame that perhaps some of the people who left before that presentation didn't have the opportunity to see exactly what this council is doing to help people in Colchester in these difficult times. Councillor Bourne, have you anything further to add? I'm sure you have.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's clear to see from that presentation why we are making that significant investment and the difference it makes to people's lives, to residents' lives, not just the people that live there, but their relatives and friends as well who come to visit, knowing that there is peace of mind. So you can see that refurbishment is certainly not a lick of paint and a new carpet. It is trailblazing, and we decided some time ago to call the new units, a word that I hate, apartments, because they have that feel. It has the hotel feel in the communal areas and has the apartment feel in each one of the individual spaces, living spaces. So the report today looks rather dry, to be honest. Sorry to Lynn, who wrote it and angst over it. But it is to appoint contractors for building, electrical and mechanical works. And it is important, we felt it was important, Leader, that we saw where that money, where that investment was going to, in order to have some background behind this appointment of the contractors, who, as you said, are all local, and local businesses will be benefiting from that appointment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking as much as a ward councillor as I'm a cabinet member on this, given that Enoch House is in, as Councillor Bourne mentioned, in St Andrews ward. And has long been a scheme where people have liked to live, although it was showing its age. And I think not having ensuite facilities in this day and age is just not acceptable. And when we went through the pain and anguish of the decisions around Joyce Brooks House and Abigail House, we did make it very clear at the time that we were going to use the investment from those sales to upgrade our sheltered accommodation to a standard where I think we can be very proud, and I think tonight's presentation shows it, and hopefully will go some way to silence the cynics and the doubters at the time. I have to say, very impressive Worsnop House is, but second time you can improve on things because you can learn lessons from the first one. The residents from Enoch House have been to Worsnop House, very impressed. They are putting their own stamp on what they want to see at Enoch House, and I think Colchester Borough Homes ought to be congratulated for the way they're consulting residents and ward councillors. As we know, we get a regular update weekly on the progress, as do the residents at Enoch House. And the consultation with them is going very well. As you know, as Councillor Feltham, whose Worsnop House is in, adjacent, or if not in her ward, is in her ward, knows they can be fairly demanding. But most of those demands are being met. I think it's going to be excellent. And, you know, money's at a premium. We know local government's being hit yet again. But we will continue to try and get sheltered accommodation to this standard in other parts of the borough after Enoch House has been finished. I'm glad Karen Lohman referred to the library on Greenstead as the central library. I think that's absolutely right. That's where the central library is. That's where everything central to Colchester's success resides, of course. And it's great that, that the residents there who have a fondness for that sheltered scheme are getting this upgrade. And I think it's something we can be very, very proud of, and I want to thank the officers and Councillor Bourne's leadership of this project, because I think it's taken 3 years probably since we set out on this journey and had to go through that pain and anguish, but I think in the end it'll be well worth it.
Thank you. Councillor Frey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to draw members and members of the public attention to 4.5, where it indicates that the building costs have actually increased by almost 20% since we priced it in 2013 due to the buoyant construction market, which is, I think, is a good indicator of the way business and jobs are going in Colchester at the moment. And I think whilst we perhaps didn't appreciate that 20% extra costs, however, it does mean there are more jobs for local people in these projects, and that should be something we all applaud, as well as actually applauding the fact that people in Worsnop House and now Enoch House will have a higher standard, and quite rightly, of accommodation they should have had a few years ago. So I'm pleased to support the project that's undertaking.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corrie.
Thank you, Leader. As originally a backbencher when this was going through, I didn't see all the detail, and I'm really glad to have seen this presentation now and seen how fantastic it is as a finished product. I think it shows the care that we show towards our residents and the support we give those who are more vulnerable in our society. I'm really impressed with the listening process that is taking place as well, not just of the residents of Worsnop House, but the new Enoch residents who want to put a stamp on this new building. And I'm really impressed as well that not only have we combined the care for our residents, but also with green credentials and providing such a high standard eco building, and the fact that the next building is going to be the same really fills me with confidence about it. So I like how we bring together both caring for residents and for the environment at the same time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bourne and then Councillor Oxford.
Okay. I was just going to sum up, but I won't now. I was just going to thank Karen for putting together that excellent presentation, and thank Mark Wright as well, Director of Property Services, because we have, as a team, learnt an awful lot from Worsnop building, which has strengthened the expertise that was already there, and also met some very interesting companies along the way, which has helped us with our Code 4 sustainability. And the other thing I wanted to say, it's not just, as Councillor Corey says, it's not just about the residents living there, but the knock-on effect of investing in schemes like this mean that we can entice people from their 3-bedroom family homes, where they may be living on their own, into fit-for-purpose accommodation. And release those family homes. So you'll see in 4.3 that with the Worsnop experience, 3 3-bedroom family homes and 1 2-bedroom family home was made available through downsizing into fit-for-purpose sheltered accommodation, which we were not. We had problems before because, as Karen said, many of those bed sits were not attractive at all, and I certainly wouldn't have wanted my parents to have moved into one of those bed sits. So the knock-on effect from this level of investment is huge, and I think it says a lot about a borough that wants to improve the environment in that way as well, because the neighbours have all commented on how much the built environment has been improved at Worsnop, and I feel certain that the neighbours at Enoch will say the same when that scheme is completed too.
Thank you. Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Leader. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough, to be in before anything was done, and we went round Worsnop House, and it was sad, it was outdated, it wasn't fit for purpose. It was dark, and then I was lucky enough to go to see it when it was redone, and it was like walking into another planet. Couldn't believe that Worsnop House had changed. It was fantastic. There's views, there's light. People like it. They're walking around talking to each other, whereas before they sort of virtually stayed in their own rooms. And it's absolutely amazing. And if we can do as well, if not better, then our residents have something really great to look forward to. I'm really proud of it.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I can only echo the words of praise to the people from Colchester Borough Homes and indeed from Colchester Borough Council who have worked on these 2 highly successful projects. Can I ask you now to note 1.1 and to agree 1.2 to 1.5? Agreed. Thank you very much. Next item is item 8.1, and we have Councillor Bentley who would like to address us on this one.
Well, Chairman, members, thank you. I've actually come really here tonight to offer myself any questions you may have around this, but just to update you as well where we are with this particular subject of a Greater Essex LEP as opposed to a South East LEP. I won't go through all the background and the details. It's been superbly written out by Mr Vipon, so you have that before you. What I wanted to update you about and just make you sort of aware that although the letter came from myself and George Kiefer as chair of the Haven Gateway Partnership, it is not being led by the County Council. I'm simply coordinating all the districts and George all the businesses around this, and that's why the letter came from us. And I have visited, I think now, all of the district leaders and spoke to the chief executives in one way or another. And there is full support for this across the districts in Essex. And George has done a similar thing with businesses and business leaders. And certainly the IOD, the FSB and the Chambers of Commerce all support this. It's also worth just saying as well that it hasn't got universal support down in the south. By that I mean the 2 unitary councils, and they have their own particular reasons for that, and that's fine. No one's falling out over this. They have their own views, and that's absolutely fine. The districts within the south do support it. Now, why did we get here? I won't go through that history because you've got it written before you, other than to say that at the beginning of this year when we had a CELOP board meeting, it was quite clear that Kent and Medway, who have been pretty angst about this since the formation of CELOP, wanted to break away. The very strong view from the Essex contingent was that if that were to happen, we should have our own plans in place somewhat left adrift, and we should be giving government some confidence that there is a plan to follow up. The very simple reason is that there is public money at stake here for investment, and that first round is currently coming through, and you know that's happening here in Colchester. Colchester did okay out of that first round. The view from the Essex contingent is that if we didn't have a plan in place, then that might potentially jeopardise any future investments. We wanted to make sure we did. We've got here because the Greater Essex Business Board, made up of representatives from all the 4 quadrants, including, of course, Haven Gateway, have produced the report, which I think, Leader, you have now got, and so the Chief Executive has got, and comments are due back on that deadline tomorrow. Already they're starting to come back, and they will be reflected in the final draft, which goes to the Greater Essex Business Board on Monday. We will then wait to see then whether Kent puts its proposal in. I'm expecting that to happen sometime next week, and then, of course, we'll put ours in to the Secretary of State at DCLG shortly afterwards as well, and it will go in from the business leaders as opposed to local authorities, although we will be sending up backup information. So that just adds a bit more to what you have written down there, but I'm really come here tonight, so if you have any questions, I shall do my very best to answer them for you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And obviously, I appreciate that you were speaking there probably in your role as County Deputy Leader of the County Council. So, yeah. Thank you. I think it's fair to reflect that the LEP, as it currently stands, covers the area from Colchester, or indeed from Harwich, right the way down to Eastbourne. I'm not too sure of any businesses that find that as a convenient business area to operate over. It doesn't seem, and it never did seem to me, to make any particular sense. That said, the LEP has produced results for Colchester. We've had significant investments in the business park, Northern Gateway, and indeed most recently in some broadband improvements. So there is a big advantage in being in a LEP. I think our view is that we don't really want to be in the LEP that we're in at the moment. And I would urge Cabinet colleagues to carefully consider the proposals that we've got down here, particularly to support the proposal to dissolve the South East Essex LEP and to replace it with something more local, which I think will fit in much better with our business views and with the views of the businesses in Colchester and indeed in the surrounding areas. Are there any further comments? Councillor Frame.
Yes, I support all you've said, Leader. I think the South East LEP was never a viable unit. How it got to be formed, I just don't know, but I'm sure somebody had the bright idea of including East Sussex with Essex, but and it's been found out, I think, and that's quite right, that people having worked it have now realised that it just doesn't work in the form it's in. So I clearly do support the dissolvement of the South East LEP, and then we need to look at what happens then, and that's clearly a view for this council to make as to which is the best alternative, if there are any alternatives, for us. And that's the comment we're going to have to make at some stage to the government, I assume, that you know, we support or don't support whatever other alternatives there are. And I know that Councillor Bentley's done a lot of work on the Greater Essex grouping, and I think I saw a paper from him yesterday, I think, that came out. So we'll be studying that and looking to see if that's the most appropriate way to go forward as far as Colchester. And it is for Colchester, obviously, it's for what's best for the businesses in Colchester, and what we can make sure we protect Colchester from any decisions that might impinge on it. And the leader's already mentioned that there's the sort of stuff we've had from the LEP and the broadband and the Northern Gateway and the Knowledge Gateway. So that there's a huge amount. We can't not be in a LEP. We have to be in a LEP, and that's the first principle we have to decide on, and I think that's a given. Now we have to decide what's the best configuration as far as Colchester is concerned, and that's the debate we're now going to have. Not tonight.
Thank you very much for adding that last point. Councillor Young indicated, I think at roughly the point you were saying you wondered whose clever idea it was to set up the LEP, and perhaps Councillor Young was going to admit to something.
Well, no, I was going to enlighten people. I mean, everybody here is assuming that SE-LEP stands for South East. It is, of course, stands for the Sir Eric LEP, because it was indeed Pickles who came up with this idea. What he forgot when he created this enormous area was that the L in LEP stands for local, and if it's from Hastings to Harwich, it's not very local. So I'm glad that some people have seen the error of the ways and have come with an alternative proposal which is a lot better, because I do agree, because the new government is in place and LEPs are going to continue, we have to be in one, but one that works better for Colchester. Now, I think thanks to the drive and initiative of our officers, we have got some good things out of the current LEP, but it has been very Thames Gateway focused, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. We need something that's going to benefit Colchester more and far more local. Whether that's Greater Essex, we will wait to see the alternatives, and then we will give our opinion as a local authority. But I very much support the dissolution of the Sir Eric LEP, and hopefully something will come forward that better meets our interests, that we can engage with far better and our businesses can engage with far better.
Councillor Corrie.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to ensure that we are discussing the dissolution of this, and we're not just looking at that, we are looking forward and having a timeline in place so that we don't miss out from any funding. How are we going to change over? Will it be on one day we will dissolve and the next day we will create a new one? Is it that simple? I just wanted to maybe ask Councillor Bentley in his role here tonight if he could just explain that timeline, just so I'm feel at ease with that. I'm sure obviously you've thought about it, but just I haven't seen your recent paper. Could you just enlighten me about that changeover? Thank you.
Just for clarity, it's not my paper, it's the paper by the Greater Essex Business Board supported by local authorities. And that paper is that, yes, you can't dissolve something and then wonder what we do next. The government simply wouldn't communicate with anyone other than the LEP. And therefore that alternative proposal is there. And the plan would be, subject to the meeting of the GEB and comments that come back, by GEB I mean Greater Essex Business Board, for that to be submitted as and when we see Kent put their proposal in. And that it's a safety net. It's absolutely a safety net to make sure that we are not in the position of not having a LEP. The government needs to negotiate with that. I just want to add 2 points that Colchester has done well. My view would be how much better could it have done, because we are competing with the whole of Kent, which is a huge county in its own right, and East Sussex as well. And also, I mean, I tend to use the Harwich to Hastings, Dover to Dunmow, you know, that kind of alliteration brings it home to you, just how big it is. But how much better we could have done, how much nimbler of foot we could have been by getting projects actually underway. It has been, nearly 4 and a bit years now since the creation of LEPs, and only now round 1 money is coming out, and I think that should have gone much quicker, is my honest opinion. And just the final point I would make as well, of where actually we can operate very successfully locally in Essex, is the announcement today in the budget, which was about the A120 and the £5 million the government's putting in for feasibility, matched by the County Council's £5 million, and working close collaboration with yourselves, Tendring and Braintree Council. We will be writing that feasibility study and work to improve the A120, whatever that route looks like, because it's not been decided yet, will come a step closer than it would have done had we have put that through, which we did initially, through the CELOP, which got knocked out. So it does prove, if you want to be local, you can get things done much quicker, and that's why I think the Greater Essex LEP is much better as an approach to government.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of what I was going to ask has just been covered by Councillor Bentley, so thank you for that. But I did want to draw everybody's attention to 1.1, the second line, provided there is an appropriate alternative LEP. But I'm pleased that you say that this is a safety net. I was picked up on that, and I appreciate that. But I would be reluctant to dissolve the South East LEP, or the Sir Eric LEP, as it's been rechristened, without the alternatives there. And again, I'm cautious about jumping into the first one that's made available. But that's just the point that I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bentley, Can I thank you very much on behalf of the Cabinet for taking the time to come to us tonight and to answer our questions on the LEP and to, I think, set people's minds at rest that what we've got here is a well thought out proposal, and I would certainly urge Cabinet to support it. Cabinet, can I ask you to agree the decisions set out in 1.1 and 1.2? Agree? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 9.1, Councillor Corrie. I do apologise. Councillor Willits, you're down to speak on this one. Would you?
Thank you, Leader. Normally, the medium-term financial forecast is the issue which has the people of Colchester on the edge of their seats with anticipation about what is going to happen in the future. But today, of course, it was trumped by the Chancellor's budget. And if anything, Leader, it shows that local government is in a period of transition. Well, we've always been in a period of transition, but I think the speed of change is probably increasing. And from what I've heard of the simple analysis of today's budget, it will have significant impact on many of the assumptions which we read in the report today. So this is clearly a document. Normally it's a working document, first draft to get things going, but it has even less significance today given that there will need to be a review of what the budget means to local government, what it means to Colchester. I mean, issues such as public sector pay being pegged at 1% a year. Does that mean paragraph 4.10 in the report is correct? Rebasing of the wage or the living wage to £7.20 for everyone, not just small or large contractors working for the council, will clearly have an impact which will need to be taken into account in the way our forecast is produced. The shift from low wage, high welfare to higher wage, lower welfare has several implications, I would suggest, in our budget and our medium-term forecast. Clearly, if that pushes more people into jobs, more jobs are created, it's going to have a positive impact on the income of business rates. In table 4.2, it's going to affect the local council tax support payments in paragraph 4.16. And of course, the idea that anyone over 30k or earning over 30k should pay a market rent is going to have quite a significant impact, I think, on Colchester Borough Home. So there are all sorts of issues which have appeared today, which are going to have an impact on the paper that we're looking at. But we're never in stable times. There's always things changing. In terms of the principles which the Conservatives would insist, if we're able to insist, in regard to the 16-17 budget. The first, of course, is a traditional demand which we make at this time of year, that there should be zero increase in council tax. And I was delighted to see that you had included, Leader, that particular paragraph. But then I was concerned that rather than being an absolute statement of fact, there were a whole series of woolly words in paragraph 3.2 saying that this was just an objective, not a positive decision that the Cabinet would be adhering to during the course of the year. And certainly most people cannot see why we should not have a zero increase in tax, council tax. The end position which you report in paragraph 3.2 a carry forward of some £471,000, equivalent to 2% of council tax. And it certainly indicates that the good philosophy or the good discipline of decide what you're going to spend on tax to get the money in, then spend it in the year, is not being followed through by your cabinet if you have £500,000 left in the kitty at the end of the year. My harshest criticism, though, is the money mountain which this cabinet seems to have generated. If we look at the draft accounts for the 31st of March, ending 31st of March 2015, we see over the course of the year the general fund balances have gone up from 6.5 million to 9.1 million. The earmark reserves have gone up from 8.4 million to 10.3 million. So the cash mountain, which you're sitting on, has gone up from 14.9 million to a staggering 19.4 million. And one has to remember, Leader, that the total take for council tax in this borough only raises 10.5 million. So your cash mountain is almost twice the amount we raise in council tax each year. Now, this could be looked upon as sort of prudent housekeeping, except that we had a demonstration as we were coming in today about austerity budgets. And it is true that at a time when you have this massive cash reserve, that in the years 14-15, you made a 2.7 million cut in the budget, and this year we have a 2.2 million pound cut in the budget. And I can well see that when people read this report, they are going to find it difficult to see why it is the council is so rich and has so much money in the bank, and they are being asked, the public in general are being asked for more austerity. Now, I'm sure you will argue, Leader, that if we look at page 45 of the report, there is a table which, somewhat feebly in my opinion, explains why we have this massive money mountain, why it is so high. Yes, there are reasons given. For instance, £3.7 million, which you taxed for last year, have not been spent in the year in which you taxed it and have to be carried forward. And perhaps this reflects on the ability of the Cabinet to actually get out and deliver the projects which they promise the people of Colchester. Perhaps you need that cash mountain because some of the decisions you make are rather flaky and you build in a higher risk factor. And I'm sure, Leader, as an ex-banker, you know the need to build in risk factors when decisions are just a little dubious. So what the whole of this report suggests to me, Leader, it's time to return to the discipline of the last Conservative administration, which was have a policy of deciding what you're going to spend, taxing the people for that money and spending it in the year in which you're making that decision, rather than carrying huge sums forward from year to year without knowing when you are going to spend them. And if one looks at the statement of accounts for the last year in which there was a Conservative administration, it was interesting to see that the general fund balance at the end of the year was only 3.3 million compared with your 9-point-something million pounds. And there was only some 1.4 million pounds of risk money carried forward, and that we ended the year with balances effectively, after taking into account of those, of 1.9 million, some 200,000 above the prudent level of 1.7. So that's how it was done by the last Conservative administration, and we suggest that you follow that model for managing your money, so that we do not end up with these huge cash mountains which are illustrated in the draft accounts and in this report, which people just do not understand. That's the way it should be done, Leader. That's the way you should do it in the future. We're willing to help you solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willits. and that nice trip down to Willits World. I should, however, point out to any members of the public looking at the figures, when he referred to page 45, he actually meant page 48. And I have to say that wasn't the only dodgy figure that we got there. I have to also say, following the policies of the last Conservative administration, I remember that one, they raised council tax every year. The balances, combined balances across the housing revenue account and general fund were below the prudent level. And they had an unfunded capital programme. So certainly they didn't have a cash mountain. They had a debt mountain which they left for us to clear up. And that, councillors, is the record of the last Conservative administration and is not one which I have any intention of following. Can I also, talking about this alleged cash mountain, point out that the figures on page 48 show that actually the total amount of unallocated reserves that we have is £507,000. That works out at roughly £3 for every person in the borough. I don't think £3 is too much of a cash mountain. And I would also make the point that George Osborne today said that it was the aim of the Conservatives to run a surplus. But it would take them until 2019 to do that, and they'd introduce savage cuts to do that. Well, Councillor Willits, we produced a surplus last year without savage cuts. So surely you should be congratulating us for achieving what George Osborne failed to do. Councillor Corrie, have you any further comments on this?
Thank you. I understand on the day of a new budget that everyone will be in slight confusion and trying to work things out, but I didn't think our Conservative opposition would be so confused whether anti-austerity, higher revenue, sort of prudent revenue streams. I really don't understand where they're coming from. It seems to confuse me, but luckily with that speed of change that he's talking about, we've put Colchester in safe hands again this year. So we have got prudent reserves, and if you do look at those reserves, they are allocated, and as you say, £507,000 are there, and that actually probably will help us to cushion some of the blows of that new budget that's been announced today, and to ensure that our residents are looked after despite some of the savage cuts that are coming their way. Overall, if you have a look, we have got a cut again from the Department of Local Government, so that's a circa 13% cut that we have to deal with. So we are still in austerity measures coming from the national government, but we as a council are deflecting those away from our residents. We are putting together this report and showing these decent figures despite what the national government are doing. So when we talk about the £471,000 that we have to spend, that is partly through earned income, increased earned income that we have got here in Colchester, not through further cuts like the current government are doing. We've also named our programme where we're going to benefit all of the borough. We've called it the Borough Investment for All because we really do want to support all residents, whether through support or through enabling them in new projects across the borough. We have also, if you look at 3.4, invested in a disabled facilities grant post, so that will be supporting people who are vulnerable. We are supporting local councillors to invest in their communities with the locality budgets, and we're investing in our heritage as well with the town walls. So a number of things there that we are supporting our residents with and supporting our heritage in this town as well. If you look at 3.5, you'll see also our objectives when spending that BIFA, that Borough Investment for All, and we're ensuring that we're making the most of our heritage assets. We are providing activities and events for young people, of which I went to go and see Shaun the Sheep the other day at the big screen with some of my colleagues here and thoroughly enjoyed it. We also are providing new assistance for those disadvantaged by the changing economic situation that we've seen from today's budget. And we are improving the presentation within our town centre and making sure the jewel in our crown really does shine. I was surprised by some of the things in the budget today. especially the under-25s, hit, and we will have to look how we can ameliorate that and use our prudent position to ensure we support those kind of people in that position at the moment. So I'll make it clear again, I don't know from where the opposition are actually trying to position their attacks, but I do think Colchester is in safe hands, and it shows this through this report. We do have prudent reserves, they are being spent, and they are being spent for the benefit of all in this borough.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie. Councillor Frame.
Thank you, Leader. Before I make the remark I was going to, I didn't know whether I fully understood what Councillor Willett said about spending your money in the year that you have it, because what we're trying to do is have a much more longer term projection on how we're spending money. If he's saying we've got to deal with it within the current year, then it's a very short term mechanism, it seems to me, he's applying to what the council is trying to do. However, what I was going to comment on was the town walls, and that we're actually putting investment in to a fund to make sure that we've got sufficient money to do the repairs on the town walls, which of course is one of our great tourist attractions. So you could say, I suppose, that we're fixing the town walls while the sun shines.
Thank you. Councillor Felton.
Thank you, Leader. My ward, 30% of the children live in poverty, and it's a densely compact ward, unlike some of the more rural wards. And so we have the question there of how we respond to the children and families who over a longer period of time don't do so well. And from the community's perspective, the work that we do really depends on the longer term vision. And what we have here is a snapshot of the financial management of the council of the borough as a whole, and this combination of good financial management and an understanding of the financial environment we live in. So I, like Councillor Frame, I resent this short-term vision that the opposition seem to be proposing. We need, over a longer period of time, the financial vision which matches the community vision that we've got, so that through the various measures that you've got, some of them are listed here, but we've also in previous cabinet meetings laid out our other plans for how we spend our money, that this is looking at how, as in a responsible way, we look after the welfare of all of our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Leader. Two things that I'm pleased about in 3.4 are the investment that we're doing with our customer contact systems, so that those who wish to contact the council by digital, online, their processes, our processes will be more joined up to make this a lot easier and happier experience. As I feel that in the coming weeks and months, the people that we will really need to be there for are the vulnerable in our society. And by making sure that our digital and our online systems are the best they can be, our advisors will be able to spend more time with the most vulnerable in society that may possibly be affected by the cuts to come. I'm also extremely pleased that at last we've managed to bring back our locality budgets, which will allow councillors to have some money to spend in their ward for their residents, giving them something that they would like, which surely is what we got into being councillors for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with all that my Cabinet colleagues have said. I agree with Councillor Oxford there about locality budgets. This is something we wanted to bring back, and I'm glad that we've been able to do it. And I'm glad that you told us earlier Leader, that we're going to publish what councillors are spending their locality budgets on our website next to our allowances, so people can see what benefits different councillors are spending in their own communities. So that would be good. I also remember the last Conservative administration. I think you've delivered a withering attack on their record, and quite rightly so. Two things that you failed to mention that I will now mention, of course, is the situation they left us with First Sight. Unsigned contracts, builders who couldn't build, project managers who couldn't project manage, and that's why we had to clear up that as well. And also, you remember that they were promising an SOS bus but hadn't put any money in the budget for it. We've delivered an SOS bus, and we are sorting out First Sight as well. I'll tell you what will happen as a result of this budget. It's what happens under all Conservative governments. There'll be more inequality, more homelessness, more poverty, more attacks on young people and families. Cutting tax credits, slashing tax credits in the way they have will mean a miserable time for many people on lower incomes. And that's what we've got to look forward to for the next 5 years. And we, in this administration, will do our best to mitigate the effects of those cuts.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I do have to say that I apologise for forgetting yet more of the Conservatives' mess that they left us in from those years ago. And of course, it is interesting, isn't it, to see the philosophy that's been shown in the budget today. Tax cuts for the wealthy, benefit cuts for everyone else, and working families being hit hard. I really think this is a difficult time for the people of Colchester, and I'm glad that we as a council are in the financial position that we are in. We are able to help and assist the people of Colchester through these difficult times, even if our government has other priorities. Colleagues, can I ask you to note the 1.1 and to agree 1.2, 1.3 and to note 1.4 to 1.6?
Agreed and noted.
Agreed. Thank you. The next item is item 10.1, and it's Councillor Young again.
Thank you, Chair. Someone mentioned that they would be talking all over Colchester about the previous item. Actually, this is the item that they'll be up and down Forest Road. They'll be speaking about very little else. The revisions to the Colchester and Ipswich Museum Services Joint Committee Agreement. It is actually quite important because we've got a shared service, museum service with Colchester, between Colchester and Ipswich, that has been very successful, but an agreement that has needed updating for some time. It was out of date and not fit for purpose, so I pay tribute to Anne Hedges, our Chief Operating Officer, and Helen Pluck, Chief Operating Officer of Ipswich Borough Council, who have done a lot of work with other officers to come up with something that is fit for purpose and up to date and will take us through till 2021. And I know Ipswich Borough Council and Colchester Borough Council are going ahead very well on a joint basis, taking the museum services forward. It was formed in 2007 before either the Labour administration there or our administration here had been elected, so we inherited something else that needed sorting out, and we have sorted it out. It's taken a while, it's taken some good debate and discussion. I think you and I have been involved in a lot of that, Leader, but we're getting there, and I think the relationship now is as strong as ever it has been. Part of the revision, if people look at 4.6 on page 52, the revised agreement addresses the issue of where we charge a very reasonable fee to get into our wonderfully revamped Colchester Castle Museum. Ipswich don't charge to get into some of theirs, and that is reflected in the new agreement, and that's quite right. That will benefit Colchester, that we do gain from that, and that's quite right. So we will gain the fruits of the castle, and Ipswich have accepted that. And but I have to say, the museum offer here and in Ipswich is one of the best in the country. We've got some excellent museums here. They've got excellent museums there. If people want to take the 20-minute train ride between the two, as I do on occasion, especially during the football season, then they will go to two excellent towns and with excellent museums and cultural facilities. Of course, Colchester is the premier of the two, but not in football status, I'm afraid to say, Councillor Frame. It's very important that this was brought up to date. It's very important that this shared service continues to thrive, and I would urge you to support the recommendation in 1.1.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Are we all happy to agree 1.1? Thank you. Agreed. Item 11, to note progress and responses to members of the public. So noted.
Noted.
Item 12, exclusion of the public. Councillor Feltham.
In accordance with section 100A 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, in accordance with the local authorities brackets executive arrangements brackets meetings and access to information brackets England regulation 2012, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information, for example personal, financial or legal advice, in Part B of this agenda, printed on yellow paper, can be decided. Exempt information is defined in section 1001 and Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you, Councillor Feltham. Agreed.